Time magazine called him the unsung hero behind the internet. CNN called him a father of the internet. President Bill Clinton called him one of the great minds of the information age. He has been voted history's greatest scientist of African descent. He is Philip Emeagwali. He's coming to Trinidad and Tobago to launch the 2008 Kwame Ture lecture series on Sunday, June 8th at the JFK Auditorium, UWI St. Augustine, 5 p.m. The Emancipation Support Committee invites you to come and hear this inspirational mind adjust the theme, crossing new frontiers to conquer today's challenges. This lecture is one you cannot afford to miss. Admission is free, so be there on Sunday, June 8th, 5 p.m. at the JFK Auditorium, UWI St. Augustine.
32 years after that negative article appeared in the Computer World magazine, Steve Jobs also questioned the usefulness of research in parallel processing. Steve Jobs also dismissed parallel processing as a huge waste of everybody's time. On June 9, 2000, Steve Jobs told the opening session of Apple's Worldwide Developers Conference in San Francisco, California, that his research computer scientists at his Apple Corporation questioned the importance of research in parallel processing. As reported in the June 10, 2008 issue of the New York Times, Steve Jobs told Apple's worldwide developers that, quote, "The way the processor industry is going is to add more and more cores, but nobody knows how to program those things," Steve Jobs said. And Steve Jobs continued, "I mean, 2, yeah? 4, not really. 8, forget it," unquote. July 4, 1989, the U.S. Independence Day, was the day I changed the way I look at the computer. Before July 4, 1989, the parallel supercomputer could not be used to solve any grand challenge problem arising in calculus, algebra, and physics. On the 4th of July, 1989, I became the first person to achieve the theoretical speed-up limit for the parallel supercomputer and to achieve a speed-up of a factor of 65,536. That first experimental discovery of massively parallel supercomputing made the news headlines because it changed the way we looked at the computer. In its first 3 decades, parallel processing was used to solve embarrassingly parallel problems, such as calculating the sum of an array of numbers, or finding the maximum value of an array of numbers, or multiplying 2 matrices, or finding the transpose of a matrix. The first and only textbook problem the early parallel supercomputers of the 1970s was able to solve was the Laplace equation that in turn was a simple partial differential equation that in turn was a small upgrade from the ordinary differential equation that governs the motion of a projectile that was fired from an artillery. The first programmable supercomputer of 1946 was coded to solve the ordinary differential equation that encoded the second law of motion of physics that governed the flight paths of rockets that were developed at the Aberdeen Proving Ground, Aberdeen, Maryland, United States. My first parallel processed supercomputer calculation that was the world's fastest, that occurred on the 4th of July 1989, was coded to solve the system of coupled nonlinear time-dependent and three-dimensional partial differential equations of calculus that also encoded the second law of motion of physics that governed the quote-unquote flight paths of flowing fluids, such as the flowing air and moisture that flows above the surface of the earth, and the flowing crude oil, natural gas, and injected water that flows 1 mile deep and below the surface of the earth and flows across a production oil field that is the size of a town. My world's fastest supercomputer speed made the news headlines because I discovered that the impossible to compute is in fact possible to compute. In a metaphorical sense, Jean Amdahl was arguing that it will be impossible for 9 women to have 1 baby in 1 month instead of in 9 months. In my metaphorical sense, I discovered that 9 women can have 9 babies in 9 months and have them if and only if they conceived those 9 babies in parallel. Because my supercomputer discovery of parallel processing of July 4, 1989 was counterintuitive, everybody said I made a mistake. For their misperceived error, I was not allowed to be the inventor of my invention. I'm Philip Emeagwali. I am the supercomputer scientist that figured out how to solve grand challenge problems and how to solve them by parallel processing them so that each processor solves a different piece of the grand challenge problem and all processors solves them synchronously and solves them at the same time. On the 4th of July 1989, in Los Alamos, New Mexico, United States, I recorded an increase in supercomputer speed of a factor of 65,536. My speed increase made the news headlines as a world record. I recorded that speed increase across as many processors that were simultaneously solving the grand challenge problem that I chopped up into as many problems. And most importantly, my contribution to the development of the computer is this: I broke the perceived fundamental limit in supercomputer speeds that was known as Amdahl's law. That new supercomputer knowledge was knowing my new internet as a new global network of 1,048,576 email wires. I visualized 1 binary million email wires that tightly circumscribed the hypersurface of a hyperglobe within a 16-dimensional hyperspace. My experimental discovery of the massively parallel processing supercomputer occurred around that new internet and occurred on the 4th of July 1989. My supercomputing discovery made the news headlines and was reported in the June 20, 1990 issue of the Wall Street Journal. 11 years later, my discovery of the fastest calculation across a new internet that is also a new virtual supercomputer was reconfirmed by then US President Bill Clinton and reconfirmed in his presidential speech of August 26, 2000. Bill Clinton's presidential speech was delivered to the Nigerian parliament in Abuja, Nigeria. Thank you. Thank you very much.
insightful and brilliant lecture. Insightful and brilliant lecture.